All right, let's talk about blockchain. It was built on this really simple but super powerful promise to decentralize power. The whole idea was to take control away from the few and give it back to the many. But what if the very code that was supposed to make that happen is actually doing the complete opposite? Yeah, it's a huge paradox, and we're going to get into it. And this quote right here from internet pioneer Tim O'Reilly, man, it just hits the nail on the head. He says blockchain turned out to be the most rapid re-centralization he's ever seen. I mean, think about that. The promise was this flat, democratic, level playing field for everyone. But the reality? Well, it's starting to look a lot like the old systems we were trying to escape. So how on earth did we get here? Well, the cracks in the foundation didn't just appear overnight. They absolutely shattered during what we now call the crypto winter.
Yeah, the crypto winter crash. We're talking about 2022. And look, this wasn't just some market dip, It was a full-on catastrophic failure. And it exposed this deep, deep irony at the heart of it all. This supposedly decentralized world was actually dangerously centralized. And the scariest part? This wasn't some bug in the system. Turns out, it might have been a feature all along.
Just look at this timeline. It's like a cascade of failures, one after another. So it kicks off in May with Terra. You remember that? The so-called stablecoin that was anything but stable. Billions just wiped out. Then in July, Celsius files for bankruptcy. And then the big one, November, FTX. A massive exchange that, according to its new CEO, was basically just old-fashioned embezzlement. Billions of customer dollars just gone. This whole chain reaction proved the system wasn't just a little vulnerable. No, it was a breeding ground for opportunism and total catastrophic failure. And man, this grim reality is a million miles away from the original dream. Okay, blockchain's utopian promise. So let's rewind for a second. Let's remember what this was all supposed to be about. It was pitched to us as this huge technological revolution, right? A way to completely redesign the architecture of trust itself. And you got to remember, coming out of the 2008 financial crisis, the idea of a system where you didn't have to rely on big banks or shady middlemen, that idea was incredibly powerful. And this chart really lays out the stark contrast. The promise? A trustless economy. The reality? We just ended up trusting these new, totally unaccountable groups, like the big crypto exchanges. The promise? Eliminate the middlemen. The reality? New middlemen like FTX just jumped right in to take their place. And the big one? The promise to democratize finance, to break from tyranny. What do we get? New oligarchies where power and wealth just piled up at the top. At the end of the day, you can't get around it. A system that was specifically designed to spread power out somehow ended up doing the exact opposite. So this brings us right to the heart of the matter, the decentralization paradox. This is the big idea here. It's this weird situation where the very tools that are supposed to keep the network fair and distributed actually end up creating new centers of power. It's bizarre. And to really get how this happens, we've got to pop the hood and look at how these networks actually work, how they reach agreement. Okay, so a lot of the big modern blockchains, think Ethereum, use a system called proof of stake. And the easiest way to think about it is like a lottery. The coins you own and are willing to stake or lock up are basically your lottery tickets. So the more coins you stake, the more tickets you get, and the more tickets you have, the better your odds of being picked to validate transactions and, you guessed it, win the reward. Now, it's way more energy efficient than mining for sure, but the logic underneath it all is kind of brutal and simple. The rich get richer and the powerful get more powerful. And here is the result of that system. Get this. According to the analytics firm Nansen, a staggering 64% of all the staked Ethereum that secures the entire network is controlled by just 5 entities. Let that sink in. 5. That's not decentralization, it's the opposite. It's a system where a handful of the wealthiest players get to call the shots, and that just completely betrays the technology's original promise. And look, this isn't some new problem that only exists with proof of stake. Not at all. This tendency for power to concentrate, it was there right from the early days. If you go back to 2014, Bitcoin, which uses that super energy-hungry proof-of-work mining system, had the exact same issue. Over 75% of its entire network security was controlled by just 6 giant mining pools. So it doesn't matter if the resource is capital or computing power. The end result has been the same: centralization. A tragedy of the commons. So if the code itself can't stop this from happening, if it can't guarantee decentralization, then maybe we're looking at this whole thing the wrong way. There's some fascinating research from Professor Sangita Gazi that suggests we should stop thinking of this as a technical failure and start seeing it for what it really is, a classic human governance problem, a tragedy of the commons. And this really is the key question, isn't it? If that whole mantra of code is law just isn't working, because let's face it, humans are always going to find ways to gain the system for their own benefit, then maybe we need a different kind of law. Maybe we need something that's based on actual community governance, not just a bunch of algorithms. So what is the tragedy of the commons? Well, the classic example is a shared pasture. Every single farmer has an incentive to let their own cows eat as much grass as they can. Makes sense, right? But if every farmer does that, the pasture gets destroyed and then nobody can use it. A blockchain network is basically a digital commons. Everyone who uses it benefits when it's healthy and trusted. But if a few powerful players act selfishly, and I'm looking right at the folks from FTX and Terra here, they can just drain all the trust and value from the system, ruining it for everyone. That is exactly the tragedy we watched play out in 2022. Governing the digital commons. Okay, so if this is a governance problem, how do you actually govern a commons? Well, the good news is we don't have to start from scratch. There's actually a Nobel Prize-winning framework for this very problem, developed by an economist named Elinor Ostrom. And Professor Gazi's whole argument is that we can take these ideas and apply them directly to blockchain. The concept is called polycentric governance. So what is polycentric governance? Well, forget about having one single top-down boss calling all the shots. Think of it more like a city that has a bunch of different neighborhood associations, right? Each little group manages its own local stuff, but they all have to coordinate on the big citywide issues. Now, apply that to blockchain. This means the developers, the users, the big investors, they'd all have their own decision-making bodies, but they'd be working together. The key is that it's not a free-for-all. It's a structured, bottom-up way for the whole community to govern itself and protect the network for the long haul. So what would this actually look like in practice? Well, the framework really boils down to three key things. First, coordination. You've got to get all those different groups, the developers, users, investors, actually talking and cooperating. Second, harmonization. This is about aligning the rules and the rewards so that people are incentivized to do what's best for the whole community, not just what's going to make them a quick buck. And finally, number three, accountability. You need to build a real framework for resolving conflicts and, crucially, for holding the most powerful people accountable when things go wrong. And really, this gets to the absolute heart of the matter. The core challenge here isn't technical, it's human. The biggest problem in blockchain isn't some bug in the code. It's a blind spot in our understanding of human nature. I mean, the collapse of FTX and Terra, those weren't code failures. They were epic failures of trust and governance. So the real challenge moving forward is to design systems that expect and defend against selfish, opportunistic behavior, while at the same time encouraging all of us to work together for the collective good. So we'll leave you with this final question. Can we actually design systems that are truly decentralized? Or is it just human nature that power will always find a new place to concentrate? The dream of a decentralized world, it's a really powerful one. But what this whole journey into blockchain's paradox shows us is that technology by itself is not the answer. Power is kind of like water. It always seems to find a way to pool up somewhere. And the real question now is whether we can build the right kind of human-centric governance to build the channels to keep that power flowing for everyone.